This is the Tapped In Podcast, the podcast for beverage distributors that want to empower their sales team to drive business results. Listen up and welcome back to another episode of the Tapped In Sales Podcast. I'm your host, Bud, here with Mikey. We'll call Data Science Mike today, but also with head of economics, the chief economist officer at NBWA, all the other, you got other titles than that too.
I got a badge, man. I got a data badge.
Well, you're also the new vocab crew as well at CiderCon.
Yeah.
You got yourself in trouble there too. So Lester, thanks for joining us. For those of you listening who don't know Lester is the chief economist at NBWA, National Beer Wholesalers Association, and we are going to be nerding out on some industry insights, some consumer insights, and some just economic news as well.
Yeah.
So Lester, how about you introduce yourself for the crew?
All right. So my name's Lester Jones, chief economist, vice president of the analytics at the National Beer Wholesalers Association. I've been doing this for decades, I guess. I started my career with Nielsen and Arbitron doing consumer methodology and consumer research. Ended up at the Beer Institute, which is a trade association for the large brewers, kind of a sister organization to the Brewers Association. It's works with Anheuser-Busch, Molson Coors, Constellation, Heineken, some of the larger brewers. Did that for about 10 years and then moved over to work with the beer wholesalers. And for over 10 years, I've been chugging away, counting cases of beer for the National Beer Wholesalers Association. So
love it.
Been tons of fun. Been great run. I tell you what, it's nothing better than working in the beer industry and being able to say crazy things and people appreciate it. Not like those wine and spirits guys that always seem so stuffy and uptight about their data. But I think we have a little bit better perspective on our market and our consumers, and we appreciate blending in a little bit of humor and a little bit of perspective on what we do from an analytics standpoint.
Well, that's why we're here. We're going to have some fun today and talk about some of those interesting things. You were just at CiderCon too. How was CiderCon?
Yeah. CiderCon was great. It's, people bust on cider. Cider, had a big run up when all the big macro guys tried to get into it with Crispin and Cedre and Johnny Appleseed and all the other crazy stuff. But cider really is a good local, regional kind of craft thing. It belongs in a certain space. And these guys, the smaller guys, are doing a good job. They're eating away at the Angry Orchard, which is the kind of the industry leader. And for years, they've been pecking away at it slowly. And we're starting to see, some signs of life and some sign of growth in the small regional craft ciders that, these guys well deserved, I think.
Awesome. Mikey, we have a lot of experience with cider. One of the best trades I ever made was selling Crispin cider, Lester.
Really?
We sold, so we got the brand at Atlas as, an AB wholesaler because they were an independent cider maker. Mm-hmm. And then Molson Coors bought them. And then it's like, no, we'll just hang on to it. We continued to grow it for like another 24 months. And then it just got to the point where we were like, we're going to unload this thing. I think it's the right time to do it. And we did. And then it was DQ'd like 18 months later. Best trade I ever made. It just evaporated overnight.
Yeah. The cider world, the cider world is just another one of these segments, like hard sodas and seltzers and RTDs that they just have these big explosive amounts of growth. Everyone overinvests in them. Everyone, puts too much, into it. And it's what we do as an industry because everyone wants to be a winner, right? You don't get in the pool and swim to be in last place. You get in the pool and swim to be first place, and you swim like crazy. And then you look up and you're like, oh shit, I came in 8th. Oops. Yep. But I tried, and so when you're really swimming hard, you're not really looking around and trying to see what's going on. You're just trying to get to the finish and then see where you are. And so we do that so frequently over and over and over again in our industry. And it's nothing wrong with it. It's just, we have to recognize it's what we do. And so cider right now is a good industry. They have a new president that they just hired. She's coming from the dairy side of the business. So I think she's going to do a great job. between the Brewers Association with Bart and the Cider Association having new presidents. I think there's a lot of, some fresh blood in here. So hopefully we get some good returns as all these little individual components add up to
Yeah.
something big for the total industry.
100%. It's
Yeah.
part of, and in the distributor world, that cider plays a good role in like rebuilding what you may have lost in Bud Light or continuing to grow your business in the aggregate. It's just an
Yeah.
important component of the product process for sure.
Every case counts.
100%.
Yeah, I
So I'm
think
going to
that.
share my screen and kind of dive into one thing. You shared, let's see, window, let's do this one. You talk about the consumer being, say the right word, ambulous.
Omni-Bibulous.
There it is.
Omni-Bibulous. And I stole that from Bart Watson, and he used it years and years ago on stage at one of the CBCs, and I grabbed it because I love me a good word, even if most people can't pronounce it. But omnibibulous is a great word, willing and able to drink across all segments and categories.
I love it. So if you're watching on the YouTube or on the Spotify, you'll be able to see a chart that talks about past months reported use. So Lester, what are we looking at here and what's going on with the consumer around how they're actually engaging with multiple products and multiple even segments outside of beverage alcohol and the cannabis as well?
Yeah, so I'm a fan of Scarborough data. Scarborough data is a large panel survey. It's actually run by, Nielsen. I'm not surprised they don't use it more frequently, but it's a panel of about 200,000 households. So, I mean, we're not talking like 1,000 people in a random internet poll from Morning Consult or something. We're talking about a really in-depth panel survey of households that runs throughout the year. And every 6 months they release a set of data, and within this, and it's like I said, it's statistically significant in terms of the quantity of households that they survey, and what they do is they just ask a random set of consumer insight questions. Have you consumed beer in the past 30 days? Have you consumed wine in the past 30 days? Have you consumed cider? Have you consumed? They ask all these things, and it's really past 30 days. And what they do is they benchmark it across income, across age, race, educational status, and all kinds of different, so they can segment the total survey population. They can segment it into different groups and give you insights. And the index is obviously the best way to look at it. It's the index is basically the share of people that report the past use relative to their share of the total population. So, for example, in my thing, 21 to 24 beer index is an 86. 5.2% of beer drinkers, but 6% of the population. So that gives you that low index. And, you don't really get too upset when an index is hovering around 100, because that just means people are contributing to the consumption as the same as their population. But what you see here is I have a heat map. I have the ages down the side, and I have some beer, wine, spirits, used cannabis, beer, wine, beer and weed, spirits and weed, wine and weed, the combination of both, that intersection. Down at the bottom at the gray bar, it says 40%. So 40% of the total population here have had a beer in the past 30 days. It's about where it's been. We get 43% for spirits, 31% for wine, and then you get in this used cannabis. They asked the population, have you used cannabis? About 13%. And what's crazy is that it's really not that much larger than it was a decade ago. It was about 11, 12%. Now it's 13%. So everyone who thinks that everyone's getting high, in the aggregate, it hasn't really moved that much, right? And then we get into the cross fading, as I call it, right? Who used beer and weed together? About 7% of the population said they've consumed weed and beer in the past 7 days. And then you get 9% for spirits and weed. So the liquor drinkers, a little crossfade a little bit more intensely with cannabis than do beer drinkers. And you get the wine and the weed. Now it's funny because you could go and I've done this by race, by income category, by education, and you get all kinds of crazy little insights. But for now, what I think is important for us to recognize is this beer column. we have a lot of work to do in beer, right? Beer, the 21 to 24 is indexed in an 86, 70 and older indexed in an 82. Well, for crying out loud, guys, what's going on where 21 to 24-year-olds kind of consume at the same index rate as 70-year-olds? That's kind of where our critical thing is. But as you can see, as you age a little bit, the numbers get a little bit stronger. And I've always felt that that's good for the beer industry, because as we age, we get low up until that 40 to 40 years. 35 to 44 is where we kind of peak, at our intensity. And then you can see the spirits column and the wine column here. So, there is a demographic dynamic to what is happening in our industry today, and how beer, wine, and spirits and cannabis and all these things interact. And that's the purpose of this slide.
In case anybody was wondering, Mikey may or may not be right in here.
Where am I? Where are you circling me?
In that beer and weed spot.
Beer and weed spot, huh? Well, you got the age correct. I'm in that age bracket. I'm not sure if I'd index that high, but
but look how quickly it fades away, right? Once you get to that 40, it drops off, and a lot of that has to do, if you cross tab this with marriage and kids, it gets even worse. It's great being a single dude, having high income, living alone, getting high and drinking beer. But the minute you engage with a partner and you start accumulating offspring, a child, shit changes really quickly.
That's actually when the THC consumption in my house grew, when we had children and we were grounded. That's when we needed it.
And this is a gross generalization. It doesn't apply to everyone. We've seen the Delta 9 beverages in kind of the middle-aged female category skyrocket, and so they're all enjoying the Delta 9, beverages. And that's a certain segment of the population. So this is a generalization of the total population, and we could dive off into all kinds of little segments. I mean, there's 300 million people, over 300 million people in this country. It's a very diverse and very flat demographic, and there's so much opportunity within all these pockets of socioeconomic demographics. It's really hard to just bring it down into one generalization.
Only an economist can describe parenting as accumulating offsprings.
Well, it's trying to be politically correct. I don't know how people accumulate. I know how they did it long, long ago, back in the time of the caveman. But how it happens today, hell, I don't know.
That is awesome. Now,
I'd be interested to see that before we move on real quick, but I'd be interested to see that heat map again in a couple of years once some of those Delta 9 beverages become more readily available, right? Packaged liquor store, convenience stores, and we see some legalization, and just see that shift move down where where it's a drop off. It really drops off at the 54 mark. But coming back to being able to grab it from your local convenience store and not have the stigma of going into a dispensary to purchase some of those products, I'm wondering if it'll change that heat map some.
Yeah, it may or may not. We still have a very active and profitable black market because, the numbskulls that run our, regulatory environment for cannabis continue to tax it at such a rate that it makes the black market profitable. And, the lessons were clear at the end of Prohibition. If you got to get the black market out. And at this point in time, the local taxing authorities around the country seem to only have eyes on the excise tax and the sales tax from this, and they don't see the need to get rid of the black market component.
Well, this is a great point. We had a guy come in and talk at NBWA many, many years ago now about this. And if you distill down a heavy user's consumption, this is a 36-ounce bottle, and if you can still distill a heavy user's consumption down into oil form and put it in a bottle, it basically is this for a year's worth of consumption. So when you put that in the context of it took 7 years for the feds to stomp out the black market in alcohol and the moonshine, and gallons of alcohol is a lot of product It takes a lot of equipment and space to manufacture and make that. But when you can put it in a bottle that goes into a backpack, and we're not real serious about, this is one of the challenges with that segment. We're not real serious about the black market and snuffing that product out by any stretch of the imagination. And it's going to continue to flourish until they change in some direction. Like, it's just going to be there until it changes in some direction.
Yeah. And then we have the whole farm bill and all this hemp derived stuff and what happens with that. So it's all up in the air. I do feel pretty strongly that this chart in 5 years will look very similar. As the population ages, I think you grow out of it and you grow into a more omni-bibulous state where you kind of see in those where things are kind of like right in that 50 to 54, kind of 45 to 50. It's all kind of, everyone's kind of together in that 100 ring, and that kind of 105 to 95. You don't really, you don't split hairs. You don't kind of you don't do single digit analysis here. You do a generalization. That's why the heat map, the greens and the reds and the yellows make much more sense. But anyway, fun stuff.
One of the things you're excited about in the business in general is that from 2013 to 2023 is that there are more beer drinkers out there. Yes. There is a larger population. So talk to us about, there is a larger population. People are willing to consume alcohol still, contrary to, some of the crazy New York Times reporting or Wall Street Journal reporting on no safe level of alcohol and all of that, chaos that's going on too. There's more people out there to fight and more people out there to win.
Yes, exactly. And that's what I built this chart to show and demonstrate, is that there are actually more people drinking beer in the past 30 days than there were 10 years ago, right? And I'm sure when I do the 24 numbers versus 2013, I'll get the same thing because the population is growing. In fact, the population in 2024 grew by the largest amounts in decades. And people it hasn't really sunk in yet that, that we've grown the aggregate market. Now, are they consuming at the same frequency and velocity? Of course not. That's why the per capita consumption numbers are down. But to look at the per capita consumption numbers and say that no one's drinking beer is a kind of a false conclusion. It's not really what's happening. It's what consumers have a broad portfolio of things to buy from. They can buy all these crazy things, and beer is sharing those occasions. So, the occasion is creating more occasions and more opportunities is what we need to do, and create and bringing more people into our camp is what we need to do. To act as if it, and to write and to talk as if all is lost, I think is just a horrible characterization of the alcohol beverage market. It's, all is not lost. Let's, the occasion, the people are there, the money is there, the opportunity is there, everything is there. Let's just, focus on winning the occasions and thinking more positively about the market, and focus on that.
Well, Mike, that feeds right into that discussion we had with one of our clients, Hunter. And, Hunter brought this up after our annual letter, Lester, of like, Mike, I want to have you dive into it more too. It's like, we need to be a more connected society. So, Mike proposed that kind of concept around like, how do we get more opportunities to consume with folks?
Yeah, reminding people that beer brings people together, right? I mean, in the 2 Super Bowl ads that we saw, on the MC on the AB side, it was a drinking occasion where we reminded consumers that beer is a happy occasion. And when done in moderation, brings people together, brings you joy back to outside of your phone, right? Communicating live and in person, catching up with somebody over a beer versus catching up with somebody via Facebook or Instagram. And as an industry, just getting more and more behind that concept and pushing that concept to the consumer, especially we saw in that first chart, we're losing beer drinkers at 21 to 24-year-old age group. How do we reconnect with them or connect with them? That's a crucial age where we're shaping, hopefully, a beer drinker for life, and hopefully connecting some brands with them too. So as an industry, trying to get back and push that whole concept of, hey, beer drinking is a great occasion. No matter what the occasion is, grab some beers, come over or sit on the porch. We'll go to the garage, or we'll meet at the pub. Let's have some beers and let's talk.
Yeah. And
100%.
there's a gentleman by the name of Henry King, who was, the leader of the U.S. Brewers Association for years. And there was a famous quote when I started at the Beer Institute that, we want more people to drink fewer beers. And that's what we want. We don't want fewer people drinking more beers. That's not the outcome we want. We want more people drinking fewer beers, and we win because the sheer volume of people in our country will help us win. So it's this fine distinction, but I think we have to go out into the marketplace and say if we can get a person to have a beer on a good occasion and we can bring them together over a beer, great. Walk away. But we have to fight that. We have to fight this idea that that's out in that we want people to drink copious amounts and large quantities of beer. No, just have a beer. We want more people to have a beer.
Yep.
And along with the fight of just, against spirits and wine and cannabis too, we're also fighting against social media to where you don't have to meet up with your buddies and have a couple of beers to catch up anymore. You know everything about them by getting on your phone. So we're fighting that battle as well.
Absolutely.
I love this chart you put together, Lester, around do you have an occasion to drink? And it's all the different types of phones. I don't think my nieces would know what these older 3 phones are.
Exactly.
I never had the privilege to use one of these suckers where you picked it up and, talked into it, but I have used the rotary one before.
Yeah, it's amazing because Gallup, and once again, this is 1,000 people, and I do make fun of 1,000-person polls because, they claim that they're representative within 4 or 5% of, margin of error, blah, blah, blah. But, the fact that, the Gallup organization has done this consistently since the end of Prohibition, it's just kind of funny. You can imagine your great grandpa sitting in his house and his old timey phone ringing and someone on the other end asking if he had the occasion to have a beer today, and 2 out of 3 of them back then said yes. And you just work your way through time and it stays right around 2 or 3. There's some big ups and downs and there's that, but for the most part, it appears to me to be a very consistent response within that 5% of margin of error for 1,000-person poll, right?
Well, you can see the pendulum swinging back and forth and back and forth over time across this, and we're currently kind of in a downward, trajectory. And that I'm a big believer in long-term trends, and that pendulum is always moving left and right and back, and we're going to swing back the other direction.
Yeah, we've had low points before.
Yes.
And we'll have low points again. So don't get all upset over these things because in the long term we're going to win. We'll have winnings and losing times, and that's what you just have to deal with.
Well, and one of the ways the business is to me, it's some of it is like a per capita game. Like if you are growing capita and getting more people into your market, which is some of the economic side of just business in general. And we can see here, we've still got a nice, consistent population growth curve over the next, how many ever years? And this chart better than me, but we've got an opportunity to continue to grow the number of people that live in this country, whether it be through net migration and or also birth rate as well.
Yeah. And I mean, now you do see, this is a chart that shows single age, and 0 is obviously 0 years old, 0 to 1, freshly born, 1 year old, crawling around on the floors in your house, and there's 84, 85, your grandpa crawling around on the floor of your house. My mom's 95, so she's a once a month beer drinker, so she's in there too. But I think the point of this slide is, first of all, to recognize that there are high points. There's points of the population that exceed 4 million, and there's a whole bunch of them in that younger demographic area, and that's where I get that Omni-Bibulous. As you move it further down this timeline, you become much more willing and able to drink across alcohol beverages. So that's why I do believe that there's some opportunity for beer as this population ages into their 40s and their 50s. There's a little dip there in that, that Gen X group of people in their 50s. But but there's also, it's important to look at that gray tsunami, or the silver tsunami as they call it. We're going to keep those people alive as long as we can, and they're going to live a lot longer. And how they interact with alcohol is important, and their ability to interact with alcohol and even be a consumer of alcohol is also important. My father, when he passed away in a nursing home a few years ago, had a prescription from his doctor for a beer a day. And
That's awesome.
literally, the nursing
That
home
is
wouldn't let
amazing.
him have a beer. And they're like, well, if his doctor prescribes, he can have one. So the three of us need to make sure in your living wills that it says in the event of me being incapacitated and unable to communicate, I am allowed a beer a day every day. And
That's cool.
it should be like codified in every living will in this country that everyone who wishes to have a drink in the event of their being incapacitated should be presented with one. These are things that I think are important because, my dad appreciated his beer, every day. He'd sit down, he'd drink that thing. And I tell you what, there's a room full of people staring at him saying, where the hell are my kids? And why don't I have one too?
Yeah.
100%.
Respect your elders, every one of you, and make sure that they have a beer in case of their incapacitation.
Does that leave an opportunity for more on-premise licensing within
Hell yes.
retirement homes? And right? I mean, if you're trying to attract new people and more people into your assisted living, why not have a great bar you can belly up and have a couple beers? And
yeah, it's certain, but also, that's the tail end of this demographic, which is a demographic that this chart our country has never been presented with this dynamic before. If you go back 50 years and you look at the demographic profiles, and you look at how this is unique for this day, and it is different than anything we've had before. So if the alcohol beverage industry and beer distributors aren't looking at this and thinking about what my business was like 20 years ago and what my demographic was like 20 years ago and what it looks like today, you're missing a big part of your opportunities going forward. So I use this in every state association I speak with. Whenever I speak, I bring this out because I have 51 of these for every state. I don't have one for Guam. Maybe I should make one for Guam just for shits and giggles. But it's important to understand this dynamic.
I can see the commercial now, guys. It's party instead of the Bud Light party in the sack. It's the Coors Light party in the Fogey home.
yeah, absolutely.
My grandfather would have crushed at that. We had to take it. He had us bring in beer for parties as well. So as part of that, like Lester, immigration is important to the economy and is important to the beverage world and beverage alcohol, and really important beer too. So yes, President Trump has been talking about this and working through on doing deportations of folks. That's net negative drag on beer and beverage alcohol. But we want to have this immigration process, right? Like we need to have a process to have new people come into the country and be contributing members of the society that keep growing the economic side, but also keep growing the population and adding to the population, right? I mean, this is like chicken and the egg kind of a thing, right?
Yeah, there's absolutely. It is important to note that our population has grown through immigration. I think it's significant, especially in 2024. That's seen a huge. I think we added 10 million more people to the U.S. population base in 2024, which is huge, and that drives our economy. It's helped keep our labor markets alive and well and dynamic, and help keep wages at least in check. So these are all important things for us to pay attention to, and how it impacts the alcohol beverage market. Absolutely.
100%. We have to be focused on this in some way, and maybe speaking about it more elegantly as an industry of like, yes, we want to have immigration and we want to have legal immigration, but that legal immigration doesn't mean no immigration too.
Right.
It's somewhat
and once again, this is the generalizations that always are so. The generalizations are always so misleading. You know, when you read a story about dry January and it's put in the context of everyone's participating in dry January, and it's like, no, not really. Dry January is just dry January. We've always had it, and the data actually show that it's always been there. It's a good thing, and it's really not increasing in any rate. But my immigration, we talk about, immigration, but we don't really break it down into, well, there's legal immigration, there's illegal immigration, there's
Yeah,
there's immigration to meet labor demand and businesses and things like that. But you need to get into the details and start working things out.
for sure. And on top of immigration, there's also migration.
Ooh, yes.
Migration around. So this is a
Yep.
chart that's showing now states winners and losers. What are we looking at here,
So,
Lester?
so this is IRS data. And once again, I do believe that we should all pay attention to larger data sets and larger data feeds for our specific markets that have an influence on it, right? And that's kind of what I talk about when I say lift your head up and look around. What we see here is IRS data. It's adjusted gross income. It's the money that's leaving certain states and coming to certain states. So Florida, Texas, Nevada, North Carolina, Arizona were kind of the top beneficiaries of people moving and the money that moved with them. So Florida, was a net winner in 2021. During COVID, they gained $40 billion of adjusted gross income, mostly from New York. Texas, for example, gained almost $11 billion, mostly from California. And you work your way down. Now, the IRS records are a little lagged because I guarantee you, so like you see that Illinois one, I just did a presentation up in Illinois, and Illinois had a huge population influx in 2024. So which tells me a lot of those people that moved to Florida in 2021, 2022 probably started moving back in 2023 and 2024, probably because they couldn't insure their house.
Yeah.
Like, holy shit, I can't insure my major asset. Maybe I don't want to live here right now. So this is just a picture of what has happened. And, we're starting to see, kind of a reversal of a lot of those COVID trends around the country. I did see that in some of the fintech data that I looked at, that, it seemed that some of the states that benefited from population migration in 21, 22 are seeing a shift, and in the states that saw people leave are seeing some benefits. So there's some migration happening in this country right now that I think is significant to these big states.
Well, there's a fun fact about Illinois that I just learned about too in a news story, that 7 counties did a non-binding succession vote to succeed from the state of Illinois.
Oh boy.
And it was incredible to read this and see how these people in these communities had voted like 70% to succeed from the state. It's like, I don't even know if you can do that.
Exactly. Okay.
I thought Canada was supposed to become the 51st state, not these 7 counties in Illinois. But then Indiana's like, oh no, come over to our side. Like, just don't create your own state. Come over to Indiana counties.
Yeah.
Well, it's funny if you look at the map and you look at the Delmarva region, which is Delaware, Maryland, and Virginia. It's like this little chunk of land that people have always argued should be its own state because it's mostly chicken farmers and agriculture. It has nothing to do with the metropolitan areas. It's like, why isn't Delmarva a state? Why? Because it has so much uniqueness and commonality to this area, yet it belongs to 3 individual states when it should just be one state. So there's plenty of this stuff around.
Yeah,
So funny.
But you mentioned everybody going to Indiana from Illinois. Being a Michigander, and especially on the west side, most of our seasonal vacationers, they all travel up the west coast of Michigan from Illinois. So in the summertime, the highways, all the little resort towns and right on Lake Michigan, it's just all Illinois.
Yeah.
But that migration for vacation has been happening for a long time. But now you're starting to see a lot of them move into their vacation homes, right? Leave the state of Illinois, work from home, and migrating here permanently. And just by looking at and talking with some different distributors along the coast, they really had to shift a lot of their strategies around that too, right? I mean, Goose Island is huge in Chicago, right? Goose Island wasn't very big on the lake shore when you start moving north in Michigan, but it started to grow. Those brands were growing because that population that was migrating north still liked those brands, right? So when you start to see some of these, Florida up there, Texas up there, and they're coming from California, New York, Illinois. Do you see some of those brands sticking, and do distributors do anything to adjust their strategies around that? Like, hey, we see an influx of people coming from New York. What brands are we missing out at, or what are we doing wrong as far as strategies?
Yeah, I still do. I still do love the U-Haul data. Every year U-Haul has, has a migration report, and it shows based on rental rates how where people are moving, and what the migration is. And we saw this in COVID, where there was a point in time where a one-way rental in a U-Haul from California to Texas was, I think, $3,000. And the return, if you wanted to rent a U-Haul and drive from Texas to uh, California, was like $500. They basically paid you
Give
to
it
drive.
to you. Get it back.
Like, how much can I pay you to drive this truck from Texas? But that's the dynamics of the marketplace, right? There was such a big demand for people to load up their U-Hauls, come down to Texas during COVID, and there was just no one going out. But now, if you look at the U-Haul data and you Google, if you just go in and say how much is a one-way rental from San Francisco to Austin, and how much is a one-way rental from Austin to San Francisco, you're going to see a radically different picture just embedded in that supply and demand of rental trucks. So things are different, guys. People are moving around. Oh, this story was great because it was all about, kind of this, boomers moving to Florida. They get down to Florida. Holy crap, I can't afford Florida. Where do I go? Right? Holy cow, you're in Appalachia all of a sudden. But once again, this is the affordable place. I thought it was brilliant. I thought it was a great example of uh, of of just how migration works in this country, and how costs of living are so significant to people in those in who are looking for a retirement haven.
Well, you're looking at so many different things in this chart showing how people are moving into that Appalachian Rust Belt area, that southern Appalachian area of the country. And it's like when you look at the total cost of ownership of a home, which is your mortgage, your taxes, any HOA fees, if you have HOA fees, and also your insurance. And if you look at Florida and now the fires out in California, which will cause insurance chaos. And Florida's already in the mix of insurance chaos. The California thing will be next. That's going to suppress. I mean, the government's going to have to step in, right, Lester, and say, hey, we're going to backfill all of this expense to suppress the value or the cost, better said, the cost of the insurance. And that will keep asset prices high. Or we're going to have to reevaluate insurance costs, and that will have asset prices come down, which will cost people, money. And if they own the real estate, or it will make the prices in such a way unaffordable for certain folks because they can't afford to get insurance, or they're priced out of the market, which means they have to functionally move.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean the markets are very dynamic. They're very important
Yes.
to
Yes.
to where beer drinkers are headed and where people are headed. And our industry depends on people with stomachs, preferably. And I think 100% of us have stomachs. There may be a few of us that don't. I don't know. But for the vast majority, where people go is where the liquid's got to go, and you have to be cognizant and aware of where people are headed and what they're doing and why they're doing it, and what the incentives and disincentives are for that migration and movement.
Well, the other thing you've talked about too is like how close somebody buys beer from the place they live. It's like a zone. It's like, what is
Yeah.
it? Like less than 10 miles? The average American drives less than 10 miles to drive a beer, or is it a different number? I can't remember.
It's funny. I used to spend a lot of time looking at that. I haven't looked at it for a while. But you're right. There is, that geographic location around which people are willing to drive to buy beer. And there was a study out there, and I used it for a while. I have since forgotten that little tidbit of information.
Well, that's another thing that's changed too. Like now we get so much of our stuff delivered to our house as
Yeah.
well. Since COVID, Sarah's like been in a grocery store like twice. If I want to go to the grocery store and get fresh fruit because I'm picky about the fruit, I go myself,
Yeah.
and everything else is pretty much brought to us by Walmart, and it's super easy and is super relevant. I mean, Mikey, are you even going to the grocery store shopping all the time anymore?
Me personally, no. I mean, once in a while, but my wife usually does all the shopping. She likes. We did shipped and the pickup for a long time, but you're right. I mean, produce and fruit and stuff like that, you just don't get good quality. So I like to pick it out.
Yeah.
So, so Lester, have we?
I'm absolutely on the opposite spectrum. We downsized from a big house outside of town down to a small little house in the city. We have a small refrigerator. We probably go to the grocery store, walk up to the grocery store, hit it. It's definitely a rural, suburban, urban difference here, because if you don't, you know, but now that we live down in the city in Austin, you know, just go to the store to buy what we need for that
Right.
day. But it's easy,
Yep.
it's convenient. So
Yep.
suburban versus rural versus urban, there's huge differences there.
Anything that we've missed or that you want to touch on that you think is new, updated, and relevant?
Uh, there's I think we exhausted the demographic story there. I mean, I think what we're going to see in the you've heard me talk lots of times about the stable, predictable, and reliable consumer of total alcohol beverage. I've hung on to 2.5 gallons. Sometimes it's 2.6, sometimes it's 2.4. It oscillates around based on certain things, but I do believe, as an aggregate and as a general population, we are pretty reliable consumers of alcohol beverages, and that data plays out in a lot of the individual state data that have
Yeah.
good, solid, data that you can show. But we have a lot to keep on. We have lots of work to do to keep an eye on where these demographics and populations are headed. That's about what I want to say.
I love it. Well, let's make a pit stop there. And so, Lester, you've talked a lot about predictable and reliable consumers of
Yeah,
beverage alcohol, and we also want to, this is about getting more people to drink less rather than getting a few people to become heavy users and
absolutely.
have too many smaller number of drinkers drinking too much. So, what does that look like to you in terms of how this plays out for the next 5 or 6 years, as we kind of talked around the demographic side pretty hard
Yeah.
already?
So when you think about how the supply chain works, when you think about, I love the per capita outlet number that I've always used. I don't know if you pulled that out of that, but there was a point in early, probably around 2016, 2017, that we were putting beer everywhere. I mean, we were putting beer in Bed
Yes.
Bath & Beyond. We were putting beer, wherever we could find a place to stick a 6-pack of beer. Beer distributors did that because you know what? That's what beer distributors do. You're really, really good at putting beer in places and finding points of distribution. And when, the supply side, craft brewers are coming out, they're coming out with all different innovations and new things. We had big brewers coming out with new stuff. We had people that weren't even in the industry before, your beatboxes, your slurps, your whole kind of beyond beer category. We're creating so much volume, and we got in about 2017, 2018, we kind of like just the market just said, okay, I've had enough. I can't put a 6-pack or a 12-pack or a 30-pack in any more random places. We just can't do it. And we even saw, and we saw in 2018, 2019, we saw a constriction. We saw a reduction in outlets, and then the total number of outlets that were carrying beer. And when COVID hit, obviously things blew up. A lot of people closed up shop. A lot of people and we concentrated all of our product into a few off-premise outlets that were open during COVID. And now that we've come out of it, we've started regrowing our retail space, but it's certainly nowhere near where it was in 2017. And so where beer distributors can actually find points of distribution, hasn't grown. I love that Aldi story. Aldi's opened 250 new stores in 2024, which is amazing because, and I haven't yet figured out. I mean, is Aldi part of Nielsen, or is Aldi, or are they part of IRI? Nielsen, do they participate in those markets? And it just begs the question, what's being opened, where is it being opened, and who's visiting those stores and what's going into them.
Well, Aldi has got to be a segment of, like, I've started shopping at Aldi. You go to the regular grocery store and a carton of strawberries is $7, and you go to Aldi and the organic ones are $3.
And they're $3 now. There's
like
it's
that consumer.
Yeah, it's a huge story. And I see, I read about them. I keep track of them. I'm seeing they're opening stores all over. They're opening stores in random places too that you wouldn't expect them to see them there. So there's a certain dynamic in our marketplace that is creating new outlets and new points of distribution that we certainly didn't look to 5-10 years ago, and we're looking to them today. So I don't know what got me off on Aldi, probably because I read a story on Aldi's this morning, and I just thought, wow, 250 stores, that's pretty significant. And what are they selling, and who's really hitting those stores? I know they have a big private label, right? I know Aldi loves a private label.
Yeah.
And beer's never really been good at private label.
Our Aldi store only carries 2 non-private label brands, and they're both local. I was just in there the other day, and I was surprised by that they still haven't shifted over to more of a broad selection. But
I think this is the chart you were speaking to, right, Lester? This is the total retail.
That's it. Yeah, it's old, So there's that peak, 269. There's 269 beer outlets for every 100,000 people in 2017. In 2018, it's like, let's back off a little bit. 2019 with kind of a little bit of COVID in there, but 2020 is when it really fell off, and we're back up to 251. So you're always looking. Markets are always looking for an equilibrium, a balance between supply and demand. Beer distributors are always looking for a balance. How many outlets, how many accounts do I want to have? How many routes do I want to have? What's profitable? So all these little markets are busy trying to find a good balance between themselves. Consumers trying to figure out how far do I want to go for the right beer. Retailers, how many different products do I want to put on my shelf? Beer distributors, I have routes, I have trucks, I have people, and then this is all part of an intricate, dance of supply and demand across multiple tiers where we're trying to find equilibrium. And when I look at that 251, I'm like, I certainly don't want to see the chaos and confusion of 269 of 200, what we had in 2017. I thought that was just, you knew when Bed Bath & Beyond was selling beer next to vacuum cleaner bags, things were out of control. You just, your spidey senses tingle. They're like, oh, things are wrong. Something's amiss, but 251, probably we have a way to grow our outlets, and we need to do a little bit more probably. But once again, the dynamics of the demographics from 2021 and 22 are also in flux. So where are we going to see that store growth, and what kind of stores are they going to be, and how are people going to shop, given that, like you said, is a smaller format store so much better over, if people are buying so much more online, and that those packaged goods can come so much more effectively and efficiently through a direct to home delivery system. But then you still want, you want your fresh beer, you want your fresh produce, so how does that whole grocery world change for the industry in a world of e-commerce? I think is a fascinating story to study and to look at.
100%. Well, Lester, thanks for joining us today. This has been awesome news, and to share kind of like more of the economic side around population and migration and how the beer consumers are moving around and have a lot of fun. Any kind of parting note you want to share with the listeners?
Yeah, it's what I said at CiderCon. I said, lift your head up, look around. Don't be, I use the term Stockholm syndrome because it's, like if you're a prisoner of your data and you're in love with your data, even though it's probably not doing you really that well, it's lifting your head up and using economic data, using demographic data, to say that the American consumer was hurting in 2024 as a generalization was wrong. I mean, we had more people traveling than ever before. History of the country, more people went through TSA checkpoints. We spent more money dining out than we'd ever spent before. We spent more money buying food and beverages away from home than we did at home than ever before. There were so many indicators that the consumer was actually healthy. The consumer was doing things differently. And if you were heads down in a spreadsheet looking at what was selling, at Kroger's week after week after week, you're missing a whole dynamic marketplace that was walking right on by you. So you have to lift your head up. You have to pay attention to your podcast, listen to what people are saying, and be aware of what's happening. Lift your head up.
We're having a lot of fun with we talk a lot with clients around discovery. Some of the ideas here is just we're trying to discover new opportunities with the reps out in the field. And then it's not about whether it's right or wrong. We have a component of the application that helps reps discover new opportunities. And some of them are crazy and some of them don't make any sense, but it's about the discovery process, not about the prescription or like a doctor prescribing medicine. So it was a lot of fun to hear that from you too.
I saw one of the things that just made me, it was so exciting. It was a bar that has remote control construction equipment. Not little small ones, but big ones. Like we're talking they're like $1,000 toys. But they showed this bar. Google it. They showed this bar and everyone's sitting around a giant sand lot. And there's a whole bunch of guys driving bulldozers and front end loaders and backhoes. And they're all drinking beer. And I was like, God, this is what I want to do. This is what I want to be. I want to sit at a bar and drive a bulldozer. And I would pay top dollar to do it.
Yeah, I would pay you $15 a beer to sit there and drive a bulldozer.
Have you seen it? I'll get the link and I'll send it to you. But
please do. Yeah,
it's just, I mean, it's like pickleball. There was pickleball came along and everyone's like this pickleball thing, and now I got 3 pickleball courts that have bars in Austin. And I go by there and I always slow down and look in, and sure enough, there's people drinking and playing pickleball. That's just. It was Topgolf once.
Being creative. It's looking up, like you said. It's thinking outside of the box. It's creating drinking occasions, which is amazing. And, all the data that you shared with us today and everything we went over, if you're in one of those states where everybody's migrating, right? If you're in one of those top 5 states, an on-premise promotion of welcome to the state, let's get together. If you're new from here, I'll buy you a beer. Let's talk, and just drinking occasions, bringing people together, meeting folks, and having a few beers.
Yeah, and if they came from Michigan, there better be a Bell's. There better be a Two Hearted Ale on tap, right?
Yeah, exactly. Getting to know those people and where they're coming from.
You play to where the people came from because they're new to the area, and they probably like to see a little bit of taste of home in there.
Absolutely, I know I would.
Yeah,
and a bulldozer. Taste of home, a bulldozer, maybe some pickleball.
Oh my God! I'm going to send you the link to the bulldozer. You put it up there. You'll be like, oh my God! I want to go to this. I would travel.
Great idea.
I would put it in my calendar. If I end up in that city, I'm taking an Uber there. I'm going to spend 3 hours there.
I'm just Googling driver remote control bar. It says there's a Digger Cafe in Dubai that has opened up.
A Digger Cafe.
This is what I'm seeing on my Googles.
Yeah, Dubai. I see that on TikTok.
Yes. There's a couple of these in the U.S. Look at that. Is that?
Oh yeah, that's fun. That brings you right back to your childhood. Who wouldn't want to do that?
Brought to you by TikTok.
That would be one bar that my son wouldn't rush us out of. Can we go now?
You could go there and just drink the shit out of it, look at these dudes.
Look at that one. That's amazing.
Is that not amazing?
That is so cool.
Look at the landscaping back here.
Yes.
Is this the one that's in Dubai? Where is this one at?
This is
Dubai. Yeah, this is all
yeah.
Dubai.
Wow, what a great concept! It's just
So
a way to
good.
get people to stick around, bring them in, get them to stick around, and
Now this equipment's not cheap. They're like $800, $900, $1,200. So
oh,
you'd
I'm
have to
sure.
put down you'd have to invest like 20 grand.
Yeah,
But your ROI on this would be
amazing.
1,000%.
There's a bar in on the lake shore in Muskegon, in Michigan. It's right on Lake Michigan, but the whole bar is right on the beach, and it's all just a bunch of shipping containers. They probably have
Uh-huh.
20 different shipping containers,
Yeah.
like bunch of swings. Like all of their bar stools are all swings. They have bands out there, but since it's on the beach, this would be great for them to invest in because they have the room. I mean, they really don't have a max occupancy.
I mean, I can see dudes getting in fights. I can see fist
Oh yeah,
fights, like
that's my
some
road, man.
guy building something, another guy tearing it down, and you know, guns get drawn, and blood gets spilled. It's. I mean, it could be a reality TV show.
100%. Oh my god.
That's
Bunch
so
of like
love it.
50-year-old dudes with toys and beer and guns. Gosh,
I love it.
100%.
Well, Lester, thanks for joining us, my man. Y'all rock as always.
tons of
And
fun.
we will see you again in DC at NBWA's annual legislative conference in the first part of April. So looking forward to catching up with you again there.
Oh yeah,
And
and I didn't plug Beer Purchasers Index. We didn't even talk
yes,
about
let's do
BPI.
that. Mhm.
If you're a beer distributor, log on to NBWA, look at what we do. From everything from Beer First to our to our Beer Purchasers Index to our DPR, our comp and benefits, everything that we do for you as members. Participate, pay attention, and reach out to me at any point in time if you have a question about any of these data. I will gladly share enough spreadsheets to make your head explode.
Gotta love it. I love it.
Perfect.
Well, you rock, Lester. Thanks, my
Thank you.
man, Mikey. Thanks for joining as well. You two are the best, and
Thank you,
cheers.
Mike.
Cheers.
Cheers,
Thanks,
guys.
Lester.